For more than a decade, Wolsey's skills ensured he would lord it over the nobles. But he will be no match for the power of one woman. This is Hever Castle. In this magnificent manor house was born a woman for whom Henry would cause chaos in his court and outrage throughout the Christian world.
Here she is, Anne Boleyn.
Anne Boleyn is the daughter of one of Henry's ambassadors. She has spent her formative years in France. Now it is time for her to find a match at the English court.
She was so different from the parochial English woman and ladies-in-waiting. What she had was the it factor. She immediately stood out as this gracious personality who effectively set the court on fire. And that's why Henry immediately picked up on her.
The king's attentions are not initially honorable.
Women at the court were generally viewed as either potential wives, or whores. I don't believe that Henry was intent on making Anne his wife from the first moment he saw her. What he wanted to do was to bed her.
But Anne has other plans.
She refused to become the king's mistress. She'd seen what could happen. Her own sister Mary had been Henry's mistress for a time. That wasn't good enough for Anne. She knew what she wanted from a very early stage. She wanted to be queen.
Anne's bold proposal is well-timed. For nearly 20 years, Henry has been married to Spanish Princess Catherine of Aragon. But Catherine has failed to conceive a son and is now beyond childbearing age.
He needed lusty male heirs to stave off many people who had a much more viable claim to the English throne than the Tudors did.
All good kings had sons to take their place when they died, and Henry didn't have a son. And this became more and more of an issue with him.
In Anne, the 35-year-old Henry now sees the perfect solution. He will divorce Catherine and make Anne his younger, more fertile queen. Only the Pope in Rome can grant a divorce. Wolsey is given the task of securing it. This is a challenge for even the master fixer, and he has little respect for the king's impudent mistress. But Wolsey is slow to recognize the danger this love affair poses for his relationship with the king.
I'm holding Anne Boleyn's prayer book. In the book, she's written a note to Henry, a love letter, basically, a love note. Henry and Anne constantly wrote love notes to one another during their courtship. And this one says, "Remember me when you do pray, that hope doth lead from day to day." She's written this on a page opposite baby Jesus. What Anne is saying to Henry is, "I will deliver you of a male heir," which is something that Cardinal Wolsey could never deliver.
By 1529, after 2 years of negotiation, it is clear the Pope will not allow the divorce. A resentful Anne blames Wolsey. In private, she is heard attempting to turn the king against his counselor.
Henry, although he was disappointed by Wolsey's failure to get him the divorce, forgave him. He still liked Wolsey and he trusted his advice. Anne, on the other hand, was the one who was whispering against Wolsey. She was telling Henry that his chief minister had turned traitor. Because of Henry's paranoia, when he heard the worst about someone, he was more liable to believe it. He was very, very capable of changing his mind in the matter of moments about someone who had been high in favor. I think Anne was almost entirely responsible for the fall of Wolsey.
Suddenly, Wolsey has lost control. Now Anne has the king's ear. cardinal is helpless.
By having Henry's favour, you have wealth and status which you could accrue astonishingly fast. But if you lose it, you have oblivion.
Power now rests with the king's vengeful mistress, and in her quest to become queen, nothing will be sacred. But when Henry fell for Anne, he brought more than a woman into his heart. He brought Protestant rebellion. When heretical books are discovered in her chambers, Henry realizes Anne is no loyal Catholic.
Anne learnt about the new religion when she was at court in France and was a firm believer in the new evangelical way of teaching religion.
Audaciously, Anne seizes the moment. She reveals that reformist ideas hold the solution to the Pope's block on their marriage.
The king loved her, and so he listened when she said things about religion which otherwise he might have despised and was said was heretical.
It's incredibly explosive that Anne is an evangelical. She is effectively educating the king in the new religion, and that is a crucial point.
The heresy that catches Henry's imagination is that the Pope, the man blocking his marriage, is the enemy of God. In Henry's mind, this makes perfect sense.
He believed that God shared his plans and desires for his monarchy, for his dynasty, and for his country.
He believed that what he wanted was what God wanted. And so if there is something which Henry wanted, like getting rid of one wife and replacing her, it was God's will that that should happen.
The evangelicals also make clear where spiritual leadership must lie in the absence of a pope.
The Pope is the enemy of the church, and therefore the protector of the church should be someone else. And that person could only be the king.
To Henry, his mission is now clear. He will supplant the Pope in England, ensuring his own succession by taking over the church and granting his own divorce. Just as he cares not for the finer points of Protestantism, all he cares is that now he has the power to grant his own divorce and marry Anne Boleyn.
Henry didn't go into the Reformation intending to give up the Catholic religion whatsoever. He did it because he wanted something, and he wanted a divorce, he wanted a male heir, and he wanted that supremacy that Cromwell would offer him.
For Henry, there can be no conundrum. You are either with him or against him. The king now makes it treason to question either his supremacy over the church or the legitimacy of his new marriage. The punishment is death. A radical alliance now holds power at court. Anne and Cromwell, the king's evangelical lover and the king's reforming commoner. But in revolutionary times, no one is safe. In January, the king is badly injured in a jousting accident. Incurable ulcerous wounds now scar his legs. His moods are black, and suddenly he is heard to lament his marriage to Anne Boleyn.
Anne was completely in control of the king. She was mistress of everything, mistress of all she surveyed. Anne's primary loss of influence with Henry is down to not being able to deliver a male heir.
Anne has just suffered her latest miscarriage. After 3 years of marriage, she has borne him one daughter, but no son. Anne knows she is losing Henry's favor and fears the rising influence of Cromwell.
She had been an old ally of Cromwell's in terms of religious reform, but her frustration and her anger at being threatened by Henry's dissatisfaction made her a very angry and difficult person indeed.
Anne herself had told Cromwell she wanted to see his head off his shoulders. He knew that she was gunning for him, and he also knew that despite everything, she still had a hold over the king. She had this knack of winning Henry back, and so Cromwell could not rely on anything. He would have been very afraid.
Knowing what happened to Wolsey, Cromwell takes extreme measures. He turns on Anne before she can turn on him. Arrest warrants are issued. 5 courtiers are seized, including Anne's own brother. They are imprisoned in the king's dread fortress, the Tower of London. Their charge is adultery with the Queen of England. Anne's detention soon follows. This is a royal sex scandal with explosive implications.
These were the very steps that Anne would have climbed as she entered the Tower of London through Traitor's Gate. This is where all of Henry's prisoners would have first encountered the Tower. What she must have been feeling can only be imagined. Just hours before, she'd been celebrating the May Day tournament at the side of the king. Her arrest came as a complete shock, and here she was now, accused of treason.
Days later, Anne Boleyn is heading for the scaffold. The accused courtiers have already been executed. Cromwell has set her up. Her husband, Henry, is nowhere to be seen.
The prosecution evidence was entirely trumped up. It was very, very weak. Everybody knew it was weak, but by the same token, everybody knew that it was Henry's will.
For Henry, the charges against Anne are convenient. He is already courting one of Anne's handmaidens, Jane Seymour. To him, Anne is already dead. On the 19th of May, 1536, Anne Boleyn is beheaded. Just 1 week later, Henry marries his new queen, Jane Seymour.
Henry VIII wanted to erase all trace of Anne Boleyn after her fall. He couldn't bear to hear her name mentioned at court, and he even instructed the royal carpenters to take down her initials from the Great Hall here in Hampton Court. But such was the speed they had to work at that they missed one. Here in the centre panel, you can see Anne's initials intertwined with those of her estranged husband.